and today I'd like to share with you just a little tip about how to deal with some sort of more difficult parts of a vehicle, particularly convex curved surfaces such as this side mirror here. Often the way that you'll see people approach a mirror like this is that they'll first of all start off by applying the film to the flatter area and then start working up towards the edges here. But what you'll find is as you start to come around that curve, you start to get a lot of excess film building up. And then the temptation is to get your heat gun, put a lot of heat into that film and then stretch it around that last bit to get it down nice and flat right to that edge. And then what you do is you grab your blade and then you'll trim out your film. And the problem is that all of that stretch that we put into the film is right at the edge of our panel. And film having that shape memory is going to tend to want to shrink back from that edge. And what we've done there is we've put the maximum stress in the film right at our edge, which is always going to be the most vulnerable part of our wrap or our graphics. So what I'm going to show you is a way that we can actually reverse that and actually put most of the stretch in the flatter area in the centre and have less stress in the edge. The mirror on the other side of this car actually has got a good example of what happens when you do this, when you do that stretching right to the edge. So let's go over and have a look at that. Okay, so on the mirror on this side you can see that it's been wrapped in the black carbon fibre, and the way that it was done was it was applied first to the flat area and then stretched around the curve, and then once it was fully applied, trimmed back to the edge. But what you can see is along this edge here the film actually has pulled back a little bit and we can see a little bit of exposed paint. And also on the inside edge here, where there's quite a tight curvature, we can actually see that there's a very puckered edge of the film where it's actually pulled back and lifted off the surface as it's tried to go back to its original shape. So what we want to do is avoid that stretch right on our edge, because that is the most vulnerable part of our wrap. Okay, so the approach we're going to take is we're going to get our piece of film that we're going to use to wrap the mirror. And what we're going to do is before we actually apply it to the mirror, we're going to pre-stretch it. So we're actually going to take the bit of film, heat it up, stretch it so it's already in a stretched position. We'll then start applying that to the mirror, and then as we come to these curves, rather than having to put more heat and stretch it further, we'll actually use the heat to let it shrink back and mould itself around the mirror so that the largest portion of the stretch in the film is going to be in the centre of the mirror and the edges will actually be quite unstressed. Okay, so I'm going to basically attach the film to the car with one edge and then use that to pull against to stretch it. So remove the liner and we're just tacking one edge down. This is just to give us something to actually pull against. Now this is something where it is very useful to have a second pair of hands, so get someone to come and give you a little bit of help, just makes the process that much easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat the film and then stretch it to get it in that pre-stretch position. So I'm going to get Rob to come and give me a hand with this. So I'm going to put plenty of heat into the film. I'm just holding it just kind of taut. I'm not putting too much stretch into it, not pulling too hard. Because if I do pull really hard when it does have the heat gun on it, I'm likely to blow a hole in the film. So heating and stretching should be two separate operations. So we might bump that heat gun up to high and we'll put a whole bunch of heat into it, get it really nice and warm and soft. Then when it's hot, Rob's going to quickly put the heat gun down and he's going to help me sort of stretch the film out. So we pull it in all directions. So it's now warm, I'm going to stretch it out, so Rob will grab the sides and also pull. So we're going to pull it out, you can see it stretching, now we're just going to hold it, and we're going to let it cool down so it will hold that shape, that stretched position. Okay, now if Rob and I let go, you should see that it will hold that, it's holding that new stretched shape. So what we've done is we've pre-stretched the film, so that now when we go to apply it to the mirror, we can actually use the heat to let it shrink back to its original shape. So now we're just going to pop it off the bonnet, off the guard. Rob's going to get the other side there and we're going to start to lay it onto the mirror. Okay, so we're going to pull good tension on the film to get it laying nice and flat as we lay it onto the flat part of the mirror first. Okay. Now we'll take our squeegee and we can actually apply it to that flat area, down to the edge of the painted panel. And that's going to go on fairly easy, as you would expect. But what you'll see is, as before, when we come to this highly curved area, you can start to see all of the excess film building up, because the flat film is trying to wrap around that curved surface, so we start to build up all of those ripples and wrinkles in the film. Now, the traditional method would have been to heat that and stretch it around to get it down nice and flat, but we've already stretched this film, so what we're actually going to do is I'm just going to lightly hold it off the surface, and Rob's going to gently heat it with the heat gun, and I'm actually going to let it revert back to its original shape. And watch what happens to the film as it does that. Okay, so Rob's going to gently heat that film, and I'm just going to support it and actually let it shrink back to its original shape. And you'll watch as it shrinks, it just nicely takes on that curve. So you can see what we've done there is, rather than using the heat to stretch the film around that curve, we've used the heat to stretch it first. So we had the film in a stretched position, we've applied the stretch film to the flat area, and then as we came to that curve, we used the heat to actually shrink it back. So the most stressed part of our film is actually on this flat area, which is very, very unlikely to lift. Our edge here, where the paint ends, has actually been allowed to shrink back to its original shape. There's a lot less stress there, so that when we do trim through there, the film is not going to be so inclined to want to pull back. So we're going to get a much more stable edge. It's a small tip, but it's a very good thought to have in your mind about, can I use that pre-stretching technique to make sure that the edges of my graphic or my wrap, which are always going to be the most vulnerable to lifting, have the least amount of stress. We want to minimise the amount of stretch that we put into the film right at the edge, and this pre-stretching technique is one way that you can do that. Anyway, thank you for watching. This is Chris Cook from 3M Commercial Graphics. As usual, if you have any feedback or any questions, please leave them in the comments section below. But thanks for watching.